How severe is population aging in Asia, and what are its impacts in the future? Can governments do anything about it?
Population aging has been a major issue in some parts of Asia, particularly I would say the more developed parts of sort of East Asia and Southeast Asia, right? Well, of course, China's one child policy being very famous, recently um, changed and reformed, of course, and I think widely used examples are Japan, South Korea, Singapore, where people are more or less not having a lot of kids anymore for quite some time now. And governments have in those countries have tried many things, from sort of monetary financial incentives, things like baby bonuses, cheaper childcare, and so on, to incentivize parents to have more children, at least sort of two for every couple, right, as a sort of reproduction metric. I think what I've seen when I lived in Singapore for a long time, often traveled to China and so on, South Korea. Particularly in the big cities, cost of living is very high. In those countries, parents are very keen on their kids having sort of the best education, right? They push them very hard. Education is often very expensive if you want to go to private school or top university. And so I think, yeah, the money is an issue also because parents have become used to just being a double income family, think about their own career, their own leisure, and so on. And I think perhaps, a sort of over or perhaps under studied issue is also that in many of the surrounding countries of the countries I just mentioned, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, and so on, there's been sort of a population explosion over the past couple of decades for a variety of reasons. They're often less developed countries, sometimes sort of religiously, there's a preference to have big families and so on. I think that Japan, South Korea, China, Singapore are also a bit, in a way, a bit scared because they've seen what a major population explosion means for a country's sort of wealth and development prospects, right? So they think, well, we worked very hard for many decades to become successful countries with high per capita incomes. We have highly ranked education systems. We actually want to keep it that way, and we want to sort of maintain our lifestyle and a sense of stability. I think, of course, the big question these countries have to ask themselves, well, but for how long, right? Because 20, 30 years from now, when a large part of the population will be 65 years or older, who's going to sustain their economies? Are they going to sort of import or sort of immigrate a lot of foreign labor? Some countries do, of course, Singapore, others, Japan, South Korea, much more reluctant to do so, also because of social identity, cultural issues. So perhaps a way out, rather than trying to stimulate potential parents financially, is to really invest in technology and AI, robotization, and so on, particularly in the areas of healthcare, for instance. Because otherwise, I read a recent study in Singapore that basically said, well, if we don't invest massively in health technology, we may have a country in 30 years where half of the housing is occupied by elderly homes and healthcare facilities, right? Because we have to care for an increasingly older population. That's not a sustainable way to run a country. So those countries invest a lot now in trying to make healthcare more efficient and more technology based. But ultimately, if countries want to survive, they will either have to rely on immigration with all its pros and cons, and we see that in Europe and the US as well, or perhaps accept that they will sort of shrink over time and perhaps remain wealthy and stable, but become less important and less sustainable.